zoning, right, Pearson?
Yep.
And so you expect a lot of private applications. Problem with that is that you don't get the infrastructure improvements that you need when you start adding buildings. So that's going to be an issue. I'm not sure how we can ahead of that. Anyway, I'm surprised Gibb is not on. He's the one that asked for the meeting. Oh Lord, does everyone haven't had a good summer so far?
Well, it's still a few minutes. The meeting was supposed to start at 6:15. We got 5 minutes, so hopefully more people will come on in the next 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, my memory's getting short. Irsa, will you monitor the chat, please?
She's muted.
She's muted.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have problem helping because I'm a little distracted. I'm doing something else at the same time.
Okay.
So
Multitasking.
I am. I
Okay.
mean, I would love to. And you certainly can ask me the next time.
Okay.
But I'm kind of multitasking right now.
Catch
trying
up.
to be obedient. Yeah.
Playing catch up. I hear you. Well, we'll see. Shouldn't be too many people on tonight. This is what do you call it? Show and tell?
Well, there's something nice to speak about, so that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. As my mother used to say, "This poor dog doesn't wag his own tail."
You got that right.
Okay. So, Ms. Neal, are you guys back in the office more now, or not as much? Or
Okay, so until I can test negative for COVID, I won't be able to be back in the office, like officially. We are going in for the sole purpose of trying to get everything organized and ready for this upcoming meeting season. We recognize, Michelle and I recognize that COVID is going to make pretty much all of the 2020-2021 meeting season, committee and general board virtual. So we are just trying to get as much accomplished in the office as possible, minimizing our interactions with each other until we can determine whether or not I'm contagious or if there's anything to worry about. I don't particularly feel comfortable being around people. So, there's that.
do you know who gave it to you?
I am 99.99999% positive that I got it in the Rite Aid on St. John's Place between Kingston and Albany on March 17th when a very nasty person, in response to me asking her to please back up a little bit when the social distancing requirement was only 3 feet and she was less than a foot behind me, coughed directly in my face. So,
oh my God.
I'm 99.999% confident that that's when I got it because I started developing symptoms approximately 8 days after, which at that time in March was, the incubation period, and also that was when CB8 and CB9 was literally the predominant hotbed of New York City's COVID-19, virus.
Yeah, we have a lot of intergenerational households in this district.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so people are sharing all kinds of closeness, and this is what you get. Well, I'm glad you're better, considering that you had to stay out for 2 weeks to make sure you were okay.
I was out for over a month. I was out twice. I got it twice.
Wow.
Or I'm a long hauler, and they just haven't identified what long haulers mean.
Well, you
gotta love me. Yay!
You're looking at people who've had it and recovered to get their to get some part of their blood. I'm trying to think what
The
they're calling
plasma,
it.
one of the reasons why I was so gung ho about getting tested in in late June, not only because, Michelle and I were getting tested to reopen the office, but also because I wanted to go to Mount Sinai and donate my plasma. But in order to donate plasma, you have to test negative while testing positive for antibodies, and I tested positive for both. And they were like, yeah, no, please stay away. So
we haven't gotten that far yet. Okay, I hear
I'm
you.
eligible finally now after waiting the requisite 8 weeks for New York State to get tested again. So it's literally just finding a convenient testing site that isn't the same testing site that I went to before, which was CityMD. So that's what I'm looking for right now. And but
I went to
hopefully
Brooklyn
within the
Hospital.
next couple of days I'll get tested again, and hopefully it comes up negative. Willing.
They should have a site up here on Eastern Parkway and Nostrand Avenue. I went to Brooklyn
That would be
Hospital.
CityMD. Like I did not enjoy my experience with CityMD at all from start to finish. So I would hope to avoid them entirely. But I mean, I'll take whatever at this point. So.
There's Brooklyn Hospital, 35th Street, and First Avenue, Brooklyn. I don't remember. I was in and out of there in 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll definitely look into that because I would really like to just get the monkey off my back, so to speak, and just be able to relax and let my guard down just a little bit. Apparently, we're back to normal, but we're in fees normal, where there's no longer a social distancing requirement.
It's spelled normal with a capital R at this point. We have Ben Verde. That name is familiar online. And Mr. Barak, who changed his name to BTAC. That's okay. Thank you for coming, Mr. Barak. We are waiting for Gib Vaconi, who asked for this meeting. And it's a celebration of sorts. And blow our horn a little bit. I think everybody got copies of the Community Benefits Agreement related documents that Ellie Perriente provided at the finally approval by the council. So once that was done, he was able to register those documents with ACRIS, Automated County Registration Information System, the county clerk's office, where all the deeds have to be registered. So all of those things, if you didn't get in your email, it's all available at ACRIS. There he is. Hey, Gib.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing.
Okay. Sounds good. Would someone please remind me who Ben Verde is, since he didn't respond to my question? You can unmute yourself, Mr. Verde. Nope.
He's Ethel. He's a reporter for the Brooklyn paper. He wrote the story that was published today.
Okay. All right. So we're 3 minutes into our allotted time for our celebratory meeting. It marks a successful completion of a effort to get community planning into a neighborhood rezoning that's been stalled. So, Mr. Vaconi, take it away. Unmute yourself.
Sure. So as Ms. Ty has pointed out, with the City Council's approval of the Grand Pacific rezoning, the agreements that the Community Board reached with the developer EMP Capital became effective, and the restrictive declaration was registered with the Department of Finance, and And as you saw, that's now available on ACRES. We also expect there will be a memo of agreement that that lays out in summary on the existence of the community benefit agreement. Community benefit agreement itself is not filed on ACRES, and it's not going to be distributed publicly, because if we were to do that, that would impair our ability to potentially negotiate similar agreements with other developers in the future. If we made public all of the terms of that agreement related to its various enforcement provisions, future developers could look at that like a floor and essentially, use it as a way to negotiate better terms for themselves. So we're not interested in that, and for that reason, won't be distributing that. Given the fact that we heard at the last land use meeting that the Department of City Planning now does not foresee being able to complete the ULURP process for the M-Crown rezoning during the course of this administration, it may be that we'll have cause to use a similar strategy in the future should we be presented with other private ULURP applications. I guess that's about it. I think we've already kind of been through what the general structure of the community benefit agreement and the nature of the controls and enforcement that are in place with respect to Grand Pacific, but I'm also happy to take any questions from folks about that.
Don't everybody speak at once. Mr. Barak, can you add your take on this trial that we've been through? What did it take, a year for this? A year and a half? Can you speak to that, Mr. Barak?
Timing?
Speak to your experience, what you saw as we went through this process, and what you think of the end result.
Well, certainly you had a developer to work with, and I think part of the key was getting clarity on what you meant as beneficial use. I believe talk in the beginning was like, well, if it was a bakery, that was deemed as a beneficial use, but that was not one of the uses on your list. So it was getting the developer to understand what the uses were trying to accomplish, I think was important. And the unique thing here is this is an avenue site where the Crown from the community board wasn't asking for industrial type of artisanal type uses, but the developer put that out there, and it gave the community an opportunity to leverage a little bit of additional community value by bringing something that was meant more for the mid blocks on an avenue site.
Okay.
I think
Collins, can you mute your microphone, please? There's a lot of noise.
I'd like to second Richard's comments. All of those were in fact key factors here, and I would say this opportunity also presented us with a chance to develop this structure with the restricted declaration and the CBA as a set of tools for the future. So I think there's some value in that as well. I should also say that, and give credit to kind of everybody who participated in this. As Richard pointed out, the developer Eli Pariente was quite coming and being interested in working through this arrangement. And on the community board side, Ms. Tyus and Rob Witherwax and myself spent a bunch of time with Mr. Pariente and his attorneys ironing out kind of the details of this. So I very much appreciate the help of all of the folks from the community board that participated in this. And Rob, who's not on this call, was really helpful to us as well. So to give him give him credit as well.
Mr. Vacconi, can you remind us how many housing units would be brought online if we were to go forward with Crown?
Yes, I can, but you're gonna need just to give me a little bit of time to pull up the bulk analysis for that. I don't have the figures at the top of my head, but I can get it. Just, can you
We
come
have
back?
we have the chair of our housing committee on the call, Ms. Granville. So I'm wondering how we can pick up from this success and go forward with M-Crown, given the budget cuts that the pandemic is forcing on the city. The city's talking layoffs of one type or another from one service agency or another. But if we can find a way to get M-Crown to move forward, then we have those extra housing units. I'm looking at the chat. I thought I saw a question pop up. Oh, wait a minute, go back. Question.
Yes, Peter has a few questions.
Hi, Ethel, may I speak?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Yeah, this is good questions. Yeah, I actually sent I was the person who requested that the CBA be shown to the committee, because especially if this is a precedent-setting effort, I think that the onus of the imperative is really on being public and showing the public what the CBA looks like, both in terms of because it could, in theory, have more in it than what the records that we've been shown. So as a member of the committee, I would just request that the CBA be shared. Second, there's other reasons because of who's the signatory on the CBA and looking at who signed what. That's helpful. And, as if you recall, I personally did express some concerns about adding another component to a ULURP process, which involves negotiation with the community board, given that developers do lobby community board members. This community board has heard Richard Lobel several months ago state as much. So I think it would be really helpful to see that CBA. I think that will help us judge the strategy, and will help us judge just in essence, just see that the community board is transparent. I think that's the number one first step. But then the second thing is, as I recall,
This is working on the third or the fourth thing now, Peter, go ahead.
No, this is one is a request that the CBA be shown to the committee and made public.
I heard you. I saw the email, and I'm hearing you,
The second one
Peter.
is this is why virtual meetings don't work very well, and is it when people talk over each other.
Okay.
The second is that as I recall, there were two lots, I think, that were upzoned, and two different owners is what I think we were initially told. So is that still the case, or are both lots owned by the same property owner now, or can you just address that issue as well? So number one, the CBA should be public, especially if this is precedent setting. And second, can you clarify who owns what lot and who signed the agreement, and whether this agreement covers the multiple lots that were upzoned?
So, Ms. Tyus, if you like, I can speak
So
to those
let me answer this, please, Mr. Vacconi.
Okay, sure, that's fine.
Okay. A lot of our board members want to be spoon-fed information that's publicly available. To try to cut that, I am looking at asking DCP to come down and talk to land use with a brief, maybe an hour or two, spread over a couple of different meetings for training in land use planning. Other than that, I'm looking at bringing people in from the American Planning Association to give people training in land use planning in New York City. If you're interested on your own, any of you can go to the website for the American Planning Association and see the materials that they have there. We're starting to turn towards equity, racial equity and social equity and planning and environmental equity and economic equity and planning and all the things that we have in the backs of our minds for what we want to see in our community district. Okay. The CBA was a lot of work, Mr. Crassus. You've asked 4 or 5 times now for a copy. A digest of it is available on the Automated County Registration Information System, ACRIS, which covers 4 counties of New York City for registration purposes. Please mute your microphones. Ms. Neal, can you mute everybody? Okay. All right. So to answer Mr. Crassus's questions that were repeated 4 times in addition to the emails that he sent earlier, we don't want to circulate the CBA now because DCP is not able, within their budget that has been strained, to go ahead with M-Crown. So we expect to see, unless we put up a hell of a fight, we expect to see a lot of private applications coming through. All right, so, and the more people get a chance to study what we did with the first of its kind, people will try to find ways and arguments to pick that apart and make it unusable for future applications. Okay, so another thing that folks on the Land Use Committee need to know is that property owners come to the Land Use Committee and then to the full board based on what they told the Land Use Committee as an application that's required under the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. So it's not lobbying. It's a standardized, legislatively required application, Mr. Crassus. It's not lobbying, okay? So we just want to be clear about that. And if you have curiosity about who owns what, this is publicly available information on ACRIS, Automated County Registration Information System. I think they cover all 4 boroughs except for Staten Island. That's the only one that's left out. If you want to see Staten Island, I think you still have to go out there. I wonder about that, but that may not be accurate. It may cover all 5 boroughs by now. I'm not sure. So, Mr. Vicconi, is there anything you'd like to add to my explanation?
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to say, again, an explanation for why it is not wise for us to release the documents that were signed by EMP. EMP did not sign our agreement unmodified. They did negotiate, and we did make certain concessions that we thought were reasonable. However, we don't want future developers to get the benefit of what they negotiated. We would want to be able to start at a higher level and seek terms that were as favorable to the community board, given whatever future circumstances exist, as they possibly can. So by releasing the specific terms, we would just be undercutting ourselves. We would be giving future participants the benefit of the legal advice that EMP got, and it's not wise to do that. There's no problem with reviewing the whole structure of the way the CBA works, but when we get down to the nitty gritty and the very specific provisions of enforcement, again, we'll always want to seek the best terms we can possibly get for the community board. I did want to say, I don't know if this is what Mr. Crassus was getting at, but there are other lots that are included in the Grand Pacific rezoning, and at one point, I think probably the committee members remember, there was a suggestion that owners of a couple of those other lots be given an opportunity to accept the same terms that EMP did in exchange for the same community benefit. We tried in good faith to secure that agreement from those other owners, and we were not successful. They ultimately would not agree to the same terms EMP had. They wanted more terms that were more favorable to themselves, and we did not feel like that was in the community board's interest. So we did not make that agreement with the other owners, and consequently, their lots did not receive the upzone.
Now, just to be a little clearer on,
I'm sorry, I just misspoke. They did not receive the R7D upzoning. They received the R7A upzoning that otherwise would have been what would have been the density associated with a lot on the avenue under the DCP framework.
okay, specifics always help. Now, how does that happen? That happens because city planning doesn't do what they call spot zoning. I have a piece of land like Ellie Perriente had. I put it in for a upzoning. City planning, in their quest for harmony on a skyline, will stick in other neighboring plots and lots to give a structure to what their visual image is for that, and that's how you get these other lots coming in. This one that Gib was just referencing is across the street from the main applicant's property. So, and that's a problem. It's a problem for us as a community, for city planning as an agency. They save money because the studies that they do with the limited staff that they have, this gives them more reach and import for a particular project than just that one or two buildings. So they'll add in some other buildings nearby to broaden the scope of the changes in the work that they're doing with environmental impacts, studies, and so on. So that's part of why that happened. And it can happen again. This is a standard policy for city planning. So we will continue to work with city planning towards the M-Crown neighborhood rezoning, especially because a number of private applications coming through and new and larger buildings going up will put so much pressure on the existing infrastructure that we're just asking for problems. So we need to get that done. Mr. Barak?
I wouldn't say that the Department of City Planning sticks those extra lots in. I'm not privy to the conversations that city planning has with applicants, but I'm sure there's an explanation from a sound planning judgment
Sure.
why the application goes beyond properties controlled by the applicant, but it leaves the city council to its own right. Sorry for my other phone ringing. So basically, city planning, works with the applicant. The applicant then puts forward the application, and the council has the right to reduce the scale of the zoning. The council could have removed the other lots. In this case, they chose a zone that was in scope that was generally consistent with some of the M-Crown maps between the community board and city planning. So the other lots could have been totally cut out. They could have been dealt with the way the council dealt with them, or they could have gone through as the applicant filed based on their conversations with city planning at the outset.
Thank you. Gib, anything else you need to add?
I think we pretty much covered it from my perspective. It looks like Ms. Lazur has a question that she wants to ask.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Lazur.
Hi, thank you for recognizing me. And I am very much in favor of the idea of getting training on land use because as a newbie, I need it. And of course, I have a question. And maybe this is just not clear to me because I'm a newbie, or it's because this whole process of getting a community benefits agreement that's enforceable is kind of new. But that being said, my question is, so when we voted on to approve and it was this very complicated, like, conditional sort of approval that we did for this project. I guess I understand what you're saying about not wanting to encourage other lot owners in the area from trying to get rezoning, while we're still hoping for M-Crown to go through. But I'm wondering if when we did that sort of complicated provisional or contingent vote, did we have the full content of what the community benefits agreement was going to be yet, or was the community benefits agreement further negotiated after the community board had its vote on this?
We had a basis for certain types of zoning and uses within the zone, especially in the residential mid-blocks. And that was a concession from the developer to the community. We were looking for jobs that paid a living wage in the community. And so the resolution that was passed by the full board enumerated those use groups. And we're looking for that sort of economic development to bolster the types of jobs that we have available in this community district. I see, yes, Mr. Baconi, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess, no, and I remember, the resolution and all of the principles behind it. It's more just like me trying to remember and get my head wrapped around the order of things, because
Right.
we had the vote, but I'm just wondering, was the community benefits agreement part of things further negotiated after our vote, or did
Yes.
all of that negotiation thing happen before it?
It happened after, and Gib, you can pick up the trail from there.
Sure. Yeah. So the sequence of events was like this. The developers had come to us and said, "We're proposing this rezoning. We know it is a slightly greater density than exists in the framework, and in exchange for that, we're willing to do this. Provide 25% of our ground floor as restricted uses that are the job creating uses the community has identified." At the same time that offer was made to the community board, we also discovered that the developers who had done the rezoning for 1010 Pacific Street and had made similar commitments, but had done so only through a letter of intent with the city council member, had sold their lot, and those commitments were no longer enforceable. So it was a little bit of a, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, sort of shame on me. We did not want to accept that type of an offer without some more substantial enforcement provisions. We didn't know yet what that would be at the time the community board voted on them, but we knew we needed a way to enforce performance on the community benefits the developer had promised. So what happened after the board took that vote is the community board A team, which was Ms. Tyus, Mr. Witherwax, and myself, worked very closely with some of our other sort of partner resources and crafted the community benefit agreement. We then presented that to the EMP folks and spent about 6 weeks kind of working out the terms of that in a way that everybody could agree to. Our initial terms, I think, were were probably more more restrictive than where we ended, but we ended in a place we thought was fair to everyone. So to answer your question, Sarah, at the time that the board took its vote, which I think was in November, I think it was the November general meeting, we had no text of an agreement, only the desire to have something that could be enforced, as opposed to simply having a letter saying a developer has an intent to do something. And in fact, we do have something that has relatively strong enforcement provisions through the Department of Buildings, and also through specific money remedies that the community board can. I see a bunch of questions in the chat, so I'm gonna.
Yes, Mr. Crassus is asking, the resolution was for R7A, the developer received R7D.
I'm not sure what resolution he's referring to. The community board at the November general meeting, the developer's proposal in his ULURP application was for R7D. At the November general meeting, the community board voted not to support that application unless there was a way to get a binding commitment for the community benefits that he had promised. And that was later achieved through the community benefit agreement.
So actually, this is Peter speaking. I'm just reading a resolution. I think it's the right resolution. And it's the number one, the first item says that the area be rezoned south of Pacific Street, be zoned to R7A/C2-4.
And?
Well, if the outcome is R7D, so I mean, this raises even a larger question for me in part. This plays into, just to follow back up about the process here. You know, this is I think the article that was released today called a precedent setting as a first time thing. There's been a negotiation that's happened after the resolution from the community board was passed. It just makes sense to me that you would want to, that the onus of the real imperative here is that the public be in a position to assess the value of what's happened and look at perhaps how the process could be improved if possible, because we also have a number of, we have other lots that aren't included in the agreement but did get upzoned as well. The developer received a bonus because of signing on to the CBA, received a bonus in terms of FAR in exchange for delivering a 25% of the ground floor for the designated uses. So I think, and to reiterate, the developers do lobby community board members, and they have to disclose that publicly in records. And we've had that happen with community board members here. So as far as I know, so I think we should, I'm just, again, reiterating that releasing the CBA would be extremely helpful. And because we will want to, if you're expecting individual applications to come down the pike, I think it's much more important for us to be able to look at how this works, because you're actually, there are multiple routes that the community can take relative to these things, not just resigning ourselves to a CBA. So that's what I just suggest that we illuminate this process.
So let me speak to the resolution, because I'm looking at that right now. So the resolution was to withhold support for grant. This is from the November 19 general meeting. The resolution was to withhold support for the rezoning until a set of conditions were met. The first condition was that the boundary of the area to be rezoned be limited to block 1125, lot 1, which is the lot controlled by the applicant. And if that's not possible, that the area to be rezoned south of Pacific Street be zoned to R7A C24. So let's take that one. So in fact, it was not possible to limit the rezoning to only the lot that was controlled by the developer for reasons that Mr. Barrett alluded to earlier in the discussion. But in fact, the lots south of Pacific Street were limited to R7A C24. That was the final result with the city council. Second point in the resolution was that the applicant make a binding commitment to allocate at least 0.25 FAR of the commercial ground floor to M-Crown uses. And that the commitment takes a form that provides for monitoring and enforcement and survives transfer of ownership of the project of the subject property. And in fact, that condition was also met. That condition was the CBA, and we can talk about how the CBA met each one of those criteria that the board agreed to that in the resolution. And just let me just briefly cover the last one. The third requirement was the applicant further commit to limiting the height of the proposed development to 9 stories. And you can see from the restricted declaration that was circulated earlier that that condition was also met. So the conditions in the board's resolution to provide its support were fully met. There's no question about that. And if Ms. Tyus will allow, I'm happy to talk about how the community benefit agreement specifically addressed monitoring and enforcement and transferability.
I think you need to do that, Mr. Piccone.
Okay, so monitoring and enforcement under, and this is, I think this was described in the Brooklyn paper article today as well. Monitoring and enforcement is a function of the restricted uses appearing on the certificate of occupancy for the property and on plans submitted to the Department of Buildings. So the developer will have to identify specifically which 25% of the ground floor commercial space is restricted use when he applies for a building permit, and that that area will have to be called out on the certificate of occupancy. So that provides an enforcement mechanism through inspection by the Department of Buildings. Now, the second part of that is, once he's got a building violation, is that enough to make him want to comply? Our view was no, that would not be enough to make him want to comply. So under the community benefit agreement, the developer is also subject to remedies, monetary remedies, in the event that he receives such a violation, equal to the difference between what the going rate is for commercial space and the rate being paid by tenants who are performing the who are doing the types of uses that the community board has called out. Effectively, we're taking away the incentive for the developer to cheat, because he'll have to pay a difference in what the rental value would be into a fund that will be managed by the Friends of Community Board 8 for the purpose of encouraging manufacturing uses in Community District 8. So there's a money remedy that goes beyond the building department violation, but is triggered by the building department violation. And then with respect to transferability, again, you saw, I think somebody who's just joined may need to mute. I think there's somebody dialing in who needs to mute. Call-in user number 5, whoever you are, can you mute, please?
Ms. Neal, can you mute everybody except Gib?
I'm sorry, what was that, please?
We need to mute call-in user 5.
Okay, I've muted all participants. I will mute them again. I don't know how to mute the callers because this is not a
I
this
think
is
you
not
already
an
did.
event, but everyone's muted, so I don't okay.
Okay, I think we're okay now. So the provisions related to transferability. What we didn't want to do was to create a situation where we have a community benefit agreement with developer A, and then that developer sells the property to developer B, who turns to us and says, well, I never signed the agreement, so it doesn't apply to me. And again, this, if you'll recall, this is something that directly flowed out of the experience with 1010 Pacific Street. In this case, what we were able to secure, and which would be a part, I would suspect, of any future similar agreement, is what's known as a restrictive declaration that's filed in the chain of title with the property. The restrictive declaration was actually, as filed, was actually what we distributed earlier today to the committee. So the property title, as maintained by the City of New York, provides for the restricted use, and that provision will be binding upon any future owner of the property. Likewise, the community benefit agreement itself also requires transfer to any future owner of the property. So all of the, again, both in terms of monitoring through the DOB, enforcement through money damages that are collectible by the community board, and also a restricted declaration that runs with the land, those things satisfy all of the requirements of the second provision of the board's resolution from the November 2019 general meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Vicconi. Are there any other questions in tonight's 15-person audience? Thank you all for coming. Any other questions? Well, it seems as though there are no more questions. Our next meeting as a larger group, the full board, will be next Thursday, and we'll go over the census. We need to kick up our responses to the census. And what was the other item, Ms. Neal? Ms. Neal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
For next Thursday, full board, we've got the census and voting.
Yes. Shelley Worrell from U.S. Census is on the agenda, as well as Matthew Pitt from the New York City Board of Elections. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So I understand there's some issues on both of those subjects. Then in October, we should have, as a land use committee, we may have the application that was put over for 959 Sterling Place. I'm not sure. I just got a text message saying that that contract has expired, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then in November, we will be working with city planning in the land use committee meeting for November to revisit what we can do with M-Crown going forward, given that the budget has been shrunk substantially. Mr. Barack, you have any advice for us going forward on those two projects?
Yeah, I would use the time for M-Crown in terms of a potential rezoning. When you walk the neighborhood, look at things where you think you might see opportunities for enhancement, whether it's street crossings, whether it's lane reductions, just anything that might be a quality of life benefit, and bring it to the community board's attention. Give explicit locations on that and start compiling a database of the type of things that you'd like to see embellished through a rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Barack. Any other comments or questions? I see a comment from Ms. Wedderburn.
Ms. Tyus, there's a request from Ms. Lazar to make an announcement, and Ms. Wedderburn did have a key point that I think she wanted to articulate.
Okay, Ms. Wedderburn, would you go ahead? You have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Hi, yeah, it's pretty much in the chat. I mean, one of the conversations we're having is what is the content of the community benefits agreement, and why don't we want to disclose it broadly? And it's key that we do have the enforcement mechanism, and there are only a couple of ways that you can effectively do it and have the transferability. So having something tied to the deed, so to speak, is one way we can assure that we don't get bamboozled again. And trust me, people will be trading properties in the M Crown zone for a while. So they're not going for public funds. They're not using the benefit of a municipal borrowing, as they did with Atlantic Yards, which we could have had more enforceability of the community benefits agreement if they had something called a bond covenant, which would have tied them to what they promised. And given that this is coming from the community and coming from the community board per se, we have a limit as what we can do with private property, and this is the best way that we can make sure that some fashion of our vision comes forth.
Thank you. Ms. Lazar, you have a statement, question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess this is just, first of all, what Ms. Wedderburn just brought up is totally along the lines of the things that I would love to learn more about in training for all of this. Whether it's like strictly land use and zoning, or if it's just in a broader sense, some of the ways that restrictions work or don't work. All of that I would like to know more about. But secondly, I sent an email to both you, Ms. Tyus, and to Ms. George as well. And I think you forwarded the message, but it was just about, the eviction moratorium, the most recent updates, and also the beginning of an eviction defense network in it's Brooklyn wide. I mean, Central Brooklyn is, of course, hardcore into it from the beginning in setting up this network. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to get the word out, not just among people who are already plugged into the tenant movement, but also just among neighbors who are willing to participate in helping to block illegal evictions. Wheels Up. Thank
I
you.
believe the materials that you sent, the flyers, notice, that was mailed out in an e-blast, I believe. Ms. Neal, can you confirm that? Ms. Neal? You're muted. Okay, I did ask for an e-blast to be sent out on that and for it to be posted on the board website.
Great.
So,
and I appreciate it. I mean, just today, a neighbor of mine from my previous apartment, he contacted me because somebody got their housemate illegally, threw all of their stuff out of the apartment, and pushed them out. And this isn't the first time that they've tried doing this since the pandemic started, and this is completely illegal. But this was another follow-up. So the guy who this happened to, it was a neighbor who reached out to me because the guy, it seems like his mental health has deteriorated during the pandemic, like lost weight, much less communicative than he was before, isolating a lot more. And his neighbor was wondering about what, I mean, it's hard when somebody's clearly in a mental health crisis. And he had asked me about who would be best to contact for something like this, because he didn't want to necessarily call the police, because he also didn't want to necessarily call the Department of Homeless Services, and that's what 311 had
maybe we can
suggested.
talk about this after the meeting. I have you. Can I call you after the meeting?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else in the chat that I need to look at? Okay, so this has been revelatory. Mr. Vacconi, I salute you. Thank you for all your hard work on that CBA. That was some amazing stuff.
It's a team effort. Couldn't have done it without you and Mr. Witherwax and some other folks who will remain nameless for now, who are very helpful subject matter experts to us. We have some
Okay. Tweak my memory recall here. I think we had a little bit of serendipity that Pariente wants to use that ground floor for early childhood education. So it dovetailed nicely. Yes. So
Right.
it was a good fit with what we both sides wanted. It was perfect. So, all right. So unless there's anything else, I'm going to close the meeting and ask you all to join us again next Thursday for the full board meeting. And so you can hear about ways to encourage your neighbors to vote and answer the census. We have to beat that drum, otherwise we're going to be up the creek without a paddle. I don't mean that new TV show either. And then October, I got to find it. We'll see what's happening with that, if 959 Sterling is coming or not. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.